What happens to a person's story when a diagnosis enters it? And what does it really mean to live with bipolar disorder? Welcome back to Rewriting Bipolar. I'm your host, Sophia Olsen. In our previous episode, we discussed the clinical definition and history of the bipolar diagnosis, the ideas of narrative identity and therapy, and began to contemplate the individual impact that the bipolar label can have on an individual. For the final installments in this series, we will be hearing the voices of people who have received a bipolar diagnosis. In this episode, we will be discussing the findings of my own research study that took the form of both a survey and structured interviews. I sent out a comprehensive questionnaire to individuals who had encountered a bipolar diagnosis in a clinical setting. I asked them questions about their diagnostic history, the mood states they have experienced, and how they feel the bipolar label fits into their lives. Upon completion of the survey, individuals had the opportunity to participate in a structured interview that inquired deeper into their experience. My research is qualitative and phenomenological in nature, fancy terms that essentially equate to me centering the unique, lived experiences of individuals, rather than numerical metrics. In this episode, I will be sharing the themes that arose from this research, along with audio clips from the interviews I conducted. All participants consented to have their voices shared and have been de-identified and given pseudonyms. Importantly, my research was IRB approved. IRB stands for Institutional Review Board, which is basically a committee in charge of approving and monitoring all research that involves human subjects. You have to jump through a lot of understandable hoops to make sure that the research participants are treated safely and fairly. Let's first begin by looking at the survey data. The survey consisted of both multiple choice and short answer questions that gathered demographic information on the research participants and inquired about their experience with the bipolar label. I had a total of 6 research subjects. The age range of participants was between 20 and 60 years old, and they were located across 5 U.S. states and India. Although this is a very small sample size, the data I collected was very diverse. The bipolar label does not mean the same thing for everyone. Some participants identified the label as a source of validation that helped them make sense of their tumultuous mood states. For others, they said that the label felt limiting or somewhat inaccurate. Importantly, this survey gave individuals a chance to explain their different mood experiences in their own words. Respondents could elaborate on their highs and lows beyond the clinical labels of depression and mania. A theme that emerged across all of the participants is that these changes in mood were far more impactful than a simple switch-up of their emotions. All of the individuals indicated that their oscillating mood states deeply impacted their identities and self-perceptions. Participants described moving from feelings of extreme confidence and charisma to self-loathing and shame. Additionally, there was a through line of individuals feeling dismissed by doctors, and that clinicians often reduced their complex experiences to a simple list of symptoms. Nearly all of the respondents indicated that they had received other psychiatric diagnoses, such as depression, anxiety, ADHD, substance use and eating disorders, and premenstrual dysphoric disorder. The reality of individuals having multiple diagnostic labels speaks to the complexity of psychiatric diagnoses. These terms are attempts at summarizing the vast complexities of an individual's mental experiences. When it comes to treatment, no research participants had the same story. From talk therapy to hospitalizations, and psychiatric medications to lifestyle measures like sleep, sunlight, and exercise routines, the respondents all had very diverse treatment journeys. Some individuals stated that they resist the bipolar label and feel like it doesn't quite capture their lived experience, whereas others appreciate having the diagnostic vocabulary to contextualize their experiences. The bipolar label can be deeply identity-shaping, but not necessarily identity defining. Across all of these different stories, something important stood out. Each individual utilized some form of storytelling and narrative reflection to make meaning out of their diagnosis. What is abundantly clear is that there is no singular story of bipolar disorder. Even if a group of people are united by a diagnostic label, their individual narratives are nuanced and idiosyncratic. In these final installments of the Rewriting Bipolar podcast series, we will get to hear the voices of 4 individuals who have encountered a bipolar diagnosis. Following the survey, these individuals elected to participate in a long-form interview that more deeply inquired about their experience with the bipolar label. All of these individuals have been given pseudonyms, are in their early 20s, and located in the U.S. Joanna has been diagnosed with bipolar type 1. Alex and Tatiana have been diagnosed with bipolar type 2, and Bentley's therapist suggested that she may have bipolar type 2. At the time of the interview, Bentley was waiting to get a referral for a psychiatrist. Over a month later, she has been diagnosed with an unspecified mood disorder and is now prescribed psychiatric medication that is typically used to treat bipolar type 2. Psychiatry has historically told stories about people, but these narratives are examples of personal reclamation and highlight the deep complexities that come with a diagnostic label. In this episode, we will be hearing about what it feels like to encounter the bipolar diagnosis, the different kinds of treatment individuals have received, and how each person experiences and describes their mental highs and lows. In the next and final episode of Rewriting Bipolar, we will get to hear about how the bipolar label can be both validating and stigmatizing, misconceptions around the diagnosis, the importance of personal storytelling, and silver linings. These stories provide intensely vivid and nuanced descriptions of the bipolar condition that go far beyond the simple diagnostic criteria outlined in the DSM. Explicit language and sensitive subjects, such as self-harm, suicide, and assault, are discussed in these accounts. Listener discretion is advised. Bipolar type 1 is often diagnosed when an individual experiences a manic episode. This was the experience of Joanna, who had previously been diagnosed with major depressive disorder. Joanna was hospitalized during her manic episode and was subsequently diagnosed with bipolar disorder, but she was initially reluctant to accept her diagnosis.
I would say the immediate kind of denial of no, you're wrong, I don't have that, especially because when I first got the diagnosis, it was I was just getting on the mood stabilizer, so I still wasn't really in a full place of understanding what all of that meant. So it was kind of I would say both denial and confusion.
Similarly, Alex, who was diagnosed with bipolar type 2, did not want to accept his diagnosis. Alex had been in and out of psychiatric hospitals since he was 15 and has received treatment for substance use and eating disorders. A therapist had mentioned the possibility of cyclothymia to him when he was under 18, a term he described as, quote, diet bipolar. But when he went to college, his mood volatility worsened.
It was around the age of 19 was whenever I started to really spiral down, get depressed, and have these episodes of bloody intrusive thoughts, want to hurt myself. They couldn't stop. I couldn't sleep. All I would do was pace. It was just terrible things like that. It was a very agitated depression.
Alex had previously been on psychiatric medication, and he scheduled an appointment with a psychiatrist to restart this kind of treatment.
But I went to the psychiatrist, one of them, first one, and he said that I was bipolar type 2 is what he wanted to say. He's you seem like you fit the criteria for bipolar type 2, the subtype.
Alex described experiencing episodes of impulsivity, decreased sleep, and hypersexuality, all hallmarks of a hypomanic episode.
At the time I could see, at the time I didn't see that it was that. So I was no, I don't want to be bipolar. I cannot be bipolar. That's wrong. Only bipolar's in the movies. You know what I mean? They're crazy, crazy, crazy. That's not me. That can't be me.
After this diagnosis, Alex fired his psychiatrist.
I got another psychiatrist, and that psychiatrist said the same thing. and also diagnosed me with borderline personality disorder. And I fired them and I said, can you just choose one? Like, I don't like that. And then my therapist said the same thing. Finally, the third doctor said it, and I was like, fine. If the third doctor says it, like, I'll start taking the medications. So I went through a series of like a bunch of medications, of a lot.
Alex still sees a psychiatrist and is currently taking lithium, a medication his clinicians prescribed after trying myriad other options. Alex said that the medication is extremely helpful. On the other end of the spectrum, there's Tatiana's experience with her bipolar type 2 diagnosis. She had previously received diagnoses of depression and ADHD and was prescribed medication, but she said the treatment did not work.
And at that point, I had kind of already known that it was maybe something else because I had people in my life that had bipolar disorder, and they were the ones that kept telling me, you should go get reevaluated because something's not right. Something's not clicking. And so what I did was honestly kind of just like a relief for me. I was like, now I know. Now I can actually maybe like do something and improve my life even a little bit. It was like, okay, so this is what it is. I had like inklings. I'd been told by many people, like even my family, like we have a history of bipolar. And at a certain point they were like, no, Mary's definitely bipolar. And I was like, okay, how about we go see a doctor? Have them say it first.
Similarly to Tatiana, Bentley had also been previously diagnosed with ADHD and did not find that medication helpful. When discussing her experience with what she called flip-flopping moods, her therapist mentioned the possibility of a bipolar disorder diagnosis. She also had a close friend suggest that she may have bipolar.
I guess I felt a bit like, validated that maybe two people were saying it, just because how I'd been feeling had just been so like, it felt really all over the place and out of my control. So, people who know me well, putting a name to it or, a possibility, obviously, of a name to it, it felt like, okay, maybe I'm getting closer to figuring out what's been going on in recent years. So it didn't really make me nervous or anything because I know many awesome people with bipolar disorder. So I felt nothing negative about it, only like, I guess, positive and just kind of like reinforced what I was saying. People close to me have also have had bipolar disorder, still have had manic episodes, depressive, whatnot. And those are people that have been close to me and that I love. And I feel like I never, seeing it kind of like through someone I know well, also I feel like helps destigmatize it a lot because I'm like, this is my friend, this is a loved one who, I don't think anything negative about. And, I'm watching this happen through my friend. So it just kind of, again, demystifies it a lot. So when I've been talking about it in a clinical setting, I feel like I haven't felt too judgmental towards myself or too negative about the possibility of me having this.
After completing her interview, Bentley followed up to tell me that she was diagnosed with an unspecified mood disorder and is now receiving medication that is typically used to treat bipolar disorder type 2. While she is somewhat confused as to why she received an unspecified diagnosis, she is glad to be getting treatment. Bentley had initially learned about bipolar disorder in a high school psychology class, and through her personal relationships with individuals with the diagnosis, she did not have a negative perspective on the condition. However, the other participants did not have as positive of a perspective on the diagnosis. For Joanna, her view of bipolar was heavily informed by media portrayals of erratic and sometimes dangerous people, something she calls slander against bipolar disorder. Additionally, her family had suspected that her grandmother, a person known to be combative and unkind, may have had bipolar. She had a negative and stigmatized perception of the diagnosis that made it hard for her to accept.
I got the diagnosis, honestly, especially for in my family. I was like, oh, well, I have what the mean lady has. So kind of both from my family and also from, general media stuff.
Alex's perspective on bipolar disorder was also influenced by representation in media that depicted bipolar disorder as something only crazy people have.
I don't think I'm as crazy as you think I am. Like, I think bipolar is for crazy people is what I thought. I thought bipolar was like in the movies where you get like super manic and joyful and happy and then randomly swing to like sad. I thought it was manic depressive, you know what I mean? Like it was on or off like that. I didn't realize it was a spectrum until I looked more into like the diagnosis after receiving it. And yeah, that's kind of when I was like, okay, I was like, maybe I'll accept this. Maybe it fits. And then it does end up fitting my mood patterns.
The idea that bipolar disorder is like a massive pendulum where individuals only experience moods at one extreme or another was a misconception that Tatiana also voiced.
I mean, basically the way it was described to me, which is why I originally didn't think when I was younger I'd had it, which is like, it's like a roller coaster. Like you're really high and then you're really low and it kind of just goes over and over again. I didn't understand that like you could be at different spaces of like depression and mania and they could like take different times. I had always viewed it as like, oh, this is just a thing and it's constant.
Even through the preconceived misinformation about bipolar disorder, once these individuals had time to reflect on and research their condition, they felt a sense of validation.
It just kind of, everything made more sense, like all of like the incidents that happened like growing up and like throughout college, because I kept like just being told I was depressed, but then I would go through these times where I would like spend like a week and I wouldn't sleep and I'd have all this energy and then I would just crash again, and I figured that was just like I was finding a second wind. Like we're coming out and then it would just go right back. And so when I finally like was told like, oh no, that's part of it. That's something that's part of bipolar disorder. It's not some even keel thing. I was like, okay, maybe I can finally get some help.
After his initial hesitations, Alex also found a sense of validation through the diagnostic label.
At first it made me think I was a fucking psychopath, but then I just realized it was a name to like all of the crazy things that have happened and the attempts and like all the things I went through. And I was like, oh, okay. So it's all connected. I see now. But it made me feel bad at first. Definitely. It did not make me feel like a good person. It made me feel like a psycho. And I know it's not about morality. It's about health. But yeah. But it also made sense. Like it put a name to like something that was intangible before, and now it's pretty concrete.
Even without a specific diagnosis, Bentley has found a sense of comfort through understanding how bipolar disorder works.
Like thinking about my behavior and my emotions just all throughout time, especially high school, college, through a mood disorder lens has really made me understand my behavior a lot better and has made me, just feel a little bit less like crazy or out of control, or like thinking back on certain moments and being like, why did I do that? Or why did I feel so low at this point? Nothing bad was happening. Or like, why did I feel so high at this point? And why did I do X, Y, and Z? Like that was a bit too much, a bit too out of character or whatever. Like it has helped me like look back and feel like just have a lot more compassion for myself, that maybe there is something bigger going on, and that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with me, but it just helps me feel a little bit more in control and like I know what to expect from myself in the future.
Joanna felt similarly, and that the diagnosis helped her contextualize the major shifts in mood she experienced during her manic episode.
Definitely explained a lot of things, even just explaining like what happened and like the manic episode leading up to it and everything. But it did feel like not like it solved kind of everything and it all makes sense now. Like, now I wouldn't say it's like the keystone, but I would definitely say that like it kind of filled in some pieces. I have kind of the baseline of kind of leaning towards depression. That's kind of how I've always been. And definitely when I get more depressed, it can affect my my views of myself, like self-image, all that. And on the opposite end, when I'm manic, and I have only had one full-blown manic episode, but I had an incredibly inflated sense of self. I was convinced I was going to be famous. I was like all of this stuff, that everyone was in love with me and whatever. So it was a very dramatic change, to the point even that I was convinced that I was just a butterfly coming out of my cocoon, and this is how I was always meant to be, because I was like, I love myself so much right now. And in a way that's absolutely not natural. And so I definitely would say that I notice a difference in terms of views on myself, more so when I'm manic, with that kind of inflated sense of self.
Tatiana, who also discussed having a temperament that is typically more on the depressed side, expressed similar sentiments regarding these disparate mood states.
I've gone to both ends. I've done full depression, we're gonna kill ourselves, and then full mania, nobody can touch me, I'm basically a god. I would say mania is like the really weird one, because that's the one where it's like, it's almost, I don't want to say fun to be in, because it's not fun at some points, but like, you've also never felt more alive in your whole life. Oh my god, it's insane.
Despite not being labeled as bipolar, Bentley described her moods with some striking similarities.
When I'm feeling up, like more than just like, oh, I'm feeling, actively excited and, I have a lot more energy. I'm a lot more positive. I'm a lot more optimistic. Embarrassing things that happen do not feel as embarrassing. Situations that could be embarrassing or could be a little bit out of my normal behavior don't feel as such going into them. I also feel like I tend to spend a lot more money when I'm feeling up. I really can rationalize a lot of shopping and a lot of treating myself in a way that not even when I'm feeling low, but when I'm feeling pretty calm, I can have those next steps of rational thought of like, maybe I shouldn't buy this, or maybe I shouldn't do this. When I'm feeling really up, I feel like my brain doesn't go to those next logical steps. It just hits the first of what do I want to do in this moment, and then keeps going and really doesn't worry about the consequences. And I also feel like sometimes I can feel really like I have really big self-confidence. I feel I trust myself a lot, and I feel like I kind of almost can have this a bit of a delusional sense that I'm really like connected to the universe, and that the universe is looking out for me so I can do and act like X, Y, and Z, and that's okay because I know it's going to work out, which I do feel on a general basis, but I can tell also now a bit when it's heightened, and I'm like, okay, like, girl, you don't have magical powers. Like you're not invincible. Sometimes I guess I can feel a little bit invincible to things. But when I'm feeling low, I feel like the opposite of all of that, where I have so much lower energy. Doing everything is so much more of a chore. I think I get a lot more social anxiety, whereas when I'm feeling up, I feel little to no social anxiety. And I don't consider myself a super socially anxious person. I feel like I'm pretty outgoing, but in recent years when I've been feeling down or low, it can be hard for me to be sociable with new people, but also with people I know well and people I'm really close with. I feel kind of constantly like I don't have a lot of thoughts coming to my brain. Like I feel like, there's there's not a lot. I can oftentimes feel like I don't have a lot to say, or I don't have a lot to talk about. And a lot of the thoughts that are happening in my brain are super negative, very self-deprecating, sometimes can be a little bit like, how do you like put this? Can be a little bit like suicidal ideation, or thinking about hurting myself ideation, which not acting on, but it can feel a lot like intrusive thoughts that have really only grown in recent years. And just like, yeah, really rejection feels 10 times worse. Everything I like tend to feel horrible about myself, and that other people definitely don't like me and feel horrible about me too, and everything can like be proof of that in life, and it's just really hard for myself to get out of those thought spirals. So it does kind of feel like my perception of myself is night and day between these two moods, and yeah, those are the main things that I see. I live somewhat of a similar life and routine when I'm really up and really down. Definitely some things change, but I do think there's a lot of baseline things I do in both mind states. But for sure, depression just makes everything 10 times harder and tires you out 10 times faster. Whereas when I'm feeling up, I can get a lot more done and I feel a lot more creative, and I end up doing all the things I need to do plus more. So, I guess that is an upside of, feeling super up at times.
But Alex has had a somewhat different experience.
The hypomanic episodes, they're not euphoric. They help me creatively. I do like them. They give me spurts of creativity, and I write a lot of like really good poems, I think, in my opinion, or like I make good work out of it. But also they last very short. I'm definitely agitated most of the time. I'm definitely not euphoric. I'm just full of energy and thoughts, racing thoughts that won't stop. Like I have to constantly, like I have to get the energy out. So I write like a maniac. Like I scribble on paper. Like it's like definitely psychiatric, but that's how I get it out. And like my main polarity is depressed. So I'm pretty depressed most of the time, and it feels like a gray fog. It feels like a black hole. It feels like all the cheesy idioms, metaphors that they use to describe depression. It does feel like all of that, but for me, it feels like sometimes I just can't perceive it. Sometimes not perceive it. Sometimes I just can't. Yeah, I don't even realize that I'm depressed until I'm like, wow, I have not been getting any sleep. Like, wow, I enjoy nothing. Like, wow, I've lost some weight. Like, wow, and it starts to get bad. I know whenever I can't get out of bed, that's when it starts to get bad. And it just feels like shit. It feels like that. Mixed episodes are different. If mixed episodes feel like a demon slid under your skin, and then you just start having terrible visions. I get images of blood and gristle, bones breaking sounds. Sometimes the worst it's gotten is where I've gotten psychotic hallucinations of like voices whispering. My roommates, I thought I could hear all of them saying like clearly talking bad about me and plotting, to hurt me. And then I know though, part of my brain understood that it was not real. So it was hard to call it psychosis, but I could hear it clear as day in my ear. And it was part of a mixed episode. Yeah. So it's bad though. The mixed states, it makes me like do things like hurt myself, things I wouldn't do if I was like normal, when I euthymic or whatever. If I was not, or even if I wasn't super depressed, even if I was like depressed, I usually am not that agitated. But the mixed states make me hurt myself, like cut myself. That's usually whenever I have to be hospitalized. It's when I make attempts. I'm very impulsive, extremely impulsive, and I just want to hurt myself. And then, yeah, so that's what it's like. It's not fun, but it is who I am.
Alex further elaborated about his specific experiences and discussed his relationship with the term madness.
It shows up, rears its ugly head whenever you don't want it to at any random moment. Any moment, the ground can open up beneath you. And that's what madness is. And it's kind of scary, but also it's like, well, here we go. I'm taking a trip. See you guys soon. So, there's kind of hope in that, knowing that it's cyclical and it'll end. But yeah, it's scary. It sucks, but it's always hanging over your head like a cloud. I know these are all ugly, like, typical metaphors, and when it gets ugly, it's scary. The voices turn loud. Everything turns angled and red and vicious, and you want to scratch your skin off, and then that's when it's bad, or you want to hurt yourself. Or whenever you get really manic, like I was, and I was walking through the snow barefoot in the graveyard, looking at the way the light bent through the trees, crying because it was so beautiful. Like, what's wrong with you? Go put some fucking shoes on. You know what I mean? Like, that's madness. But that doesn't happen that often. Every day, madness is just more in the minutia that kind of just drives you mad. or the fact that, like I said, the ground can open up beneath you at any moment. But yeah.
Another common theme discussed was the disorientation that comes with oscillating between various extreme mood states.
It's just hard when it's like, dang, like, I could really handle doing all of these things in a week a couple weeks ago, but now I can't do all of that. And I think sometimes it's hard for other people in life to understand that too, who also don't experience like even just like big depression or like something like a mood disorder or bipolar disorder. I think that sometimes, and maybe this is just insecurity, but sometimes I feel like people can be like, oh, like, why isn't she coming out this way? Like, why is she acting like this? And I think that can also then like make me feel bad, inwardly, and feel like, yeah, I was so like, I was acting like this and I am usually like this, but now I'm not. And why? Because there's nothing that actually really changed, or there's something really minor that like kind of started to set me off, and then it's all turned down and it's been down for days. Like it is pretty disorienting.
Bentley's experience with feeling fragmented and confused was also brought up by the other participants. Tatiana spoke to this theme and also talked about the memory loss she experienced after coming out of a manic episode.
I'm way more comfortable with the depression part of it. I feel like that's where I stay most of the time. So like mania, like trying to like deal with like the things that I have done during it and trying to like acknowledge that there's part of who I am is hard, especially because I've done some real bad shit things. And then mania, I haven't experienced it as much. I've only really had like 2 manic episodes, like real ones. And for those, I also have the issue of like, I don't remember a lot of the stuff I did. It's like a lot of it is blank and you're sort of filled in by other people about what you've done. So because my first manic episode, I remembered so little of it. And so I was informed of a lot of things by like people, and I was like, that can't be true. And as time went on, I started to remember more. And I was having just like I really made me like, been to places where I hate myself. Nothing made me hate myself more than when I came to realize some of the things I did during it, when I started to remember it. And I was like, so this is just like the person I'm going to be now for the rest of my life? Like somebody that is honestly like scary to be around. Like I'll just say, like, I had so many people tell me that like I made them feel unsafe, and I'm like, yeah, that's valid.
Alex shared similar feelings, but in regards to depression.
It's hard because the depressive episodes give you like gaps in memory and identity, honestly. You kind of feel like your sense of self dissolves, like you're nothing. And it kind of comes back together once it leaves, once the fog lifts, because it always lifts. It always does.
Importantly, the moods and emotions of the interviewees were not solely extremely high or low, something Tatiana put succinctly.
I would always just say, like, I feel like a Peanuts character. Like, I'm kind of just, like, doodling along with my day. I don't really have, like, big feelings at that point. It's really, I'm just like, this is just what I'm doing with my day, and then it's over, and then I just do it again.
During euthymic periods, times when neither manic or depressed, Bentley talked about the importance of not moralizing her different mood states.
Trying to see the highs and lows that I experience and how I act through them, like, as not like there's good me and there's bad me, or there's crazy me and there's depressed me, but it's like this is all me, and all of these things can be true at once. Like I can have a really like elated and big confidence and ego at times, but in the same breath, I clearly have a lot of work to do on, my actual self-worth and how I really do view myself. Like I try to just see it as all parts of me, and not like, oh, when I'm okay, if I'm feeling stable, I try not to be like, okay, well, beat myself up about how I was talking about myself and how I was thinking about myself when I was feeling really depressed. Or on the flip side, being like, ugh, like, that's embarrassing that you felt like you could do or say that when you're feeling up. Like, you're not the shit. It can be easy just to tear yourself down, no matter even if you're feeling good or bad. So I do just try to like take it all in and see where I can still be nicer to myself, because I do want to err more on the elated confidence than the I have no confidence and I am the worst.
Through the struggles of depressed suicidality and hypomanic impulsivity, Alex has established a more nuanced perspective.
I've done a lot of regrettable things, put myself in a lot of like compromising situations where I've gotten hurt and been assaulted because I was going through these different mood states. And I've also gone through mood states so low where like I've tried to kill myself, so they definitely, they don't feel good. They're not fun. You know what I mean? But they are part of who I am. It is what I am. They're balanced with like the good parts of life. Like they're balanced with the way I see the world in a certain perspective that no one else does, that I think gives me like a certain temperament that allows me to, create the art that I do and be the person I am, be introspective, be empathetic, be understanding, because I understand the range of emotions. I understand what it's like to be, stigmatized and stigmatize yourself. So I've come to accept it and be okay with it.
Joanna also spoke to the disorientation of going from a manic to a depressed state, but elaborated on how she makes sense of this duality.
Immediately after the diagnosis, because of just how the experience was and being on the meds and stuff, like I felt like it was a very drastic jump down into depression very quickly. And I that really forced me to sort of work through that sense of self, like going immediately from the really high to the really low, kind of just looking at that comparison, you kind of see like, okay, well, maybe the really positive one is irrational and maybe the really negative one is also irrational, and let's move forward. And I think that through like talk therapy, I was able to, especially with that like sense of self, insecurity kind of stuff, process that and work through it.
A common theme that emerged was that participants found a lot of comfort through talk therapy. But psychiatric treatment was not always as straightforward or helpful.
I've found that I've had a lot of issues with psychiatrists listening, because I think that they're just so much more on a diagnostic end, and obviously they're not there as much to be like talking about problems. But I had an issue before my manic episode where I was saying, I think something's wrong, and my psychiatrist kept saying, oh, you're just smoking too much weed, or you're fine, whatever. And then it turned out there was something wrong. And I've encountered that a few times, but I've also had, I had a psychiatrist who really listened to me. It was actually the same one who saw me in the hospital. I continued seeing her after. She like really understood, generally in terms of like feeling more heard. It's more so in like the therapy sense of like actually going through things and stuff. But in my experience, the psychiatrists are a lot more interested in just giving meds than really talking through the issues.
Alex also expressed that he did not feel particularly listened to by psychiatrists.
It's based off symptoms, and basically I would say it's like you are a dartboard and they throw pills at you, and the ones that stick are the ones that you get the diagnosis for. When it comes to therapy and stuff in a clinical setting, it is more listening to my story and sense of identity. When it comes to psychiatry, like I said, I feel I'm a dartboard that they throw pills at. It's just a bunch of symptoms, and that's how I figure out that I'm bipolar. And in full honesty, I mean, it makes sense. It doesn't make sense, but it works. That's how I figure it out. That's how I finally accepted that I was bipolar, because through medication and all big pharma, taking the ones that worked helped. That's how I realized this is what I have.
Tatiana similarly expressed feeling like a guinea pig for different psychiatric medications.
your brain sort of becomes like your own little science experiment that you have to do when you get diagnosed. Is because like you have to spend all this time trying to figure out what's going to work for you, and a lot of it doesn't work. Thing where I was like, well, it's gonna take like a few weeks for your body to adjust, so then you have to go through like the 2 or 3 weeks where literally like you are dead. It feels like somebody has like poured concretes in your insides. You're being weighed down. I'm like going to the bottom of the Esplanade right now.
Even though the med adjustment process can be hard, she is grateful to have found a psychiatrist that listened to her. However, her treatment was not 100% perfect.
Shout out to the psychiatrist who was doing my meds. I felt he listened to me very well. There was one point where I don't know where he was getting his information, but he was like, it's very important you get back on birth control. It's so important. I was like, I don't know who you think I'm fucking, buddy.
At the time of the interview, Bentley was waiting to get a referral for a psychiatrist, a process she described as very time-consuming. She first had to speak with her primary care physician. She told him about her mood experiences and that her therapist of over 6 years thought it was very possible she might have a bipolar diagnosis.
My primary care doctor's response I found a little bit funny. I don't know. He was asking me questions like, do you see people that aren't there? Are you talking to yourself? And I'm like, okay, I'm not seeing things that aren't there, I don't presume, but that's also kind of a hard question to answer if you are seeing things, but I don't believe I am. And, do I talk to myself? Yes, I do. But what do you mean by that? Some of his questions seemed a little bit, I don't know, stigmatized to me. And also, I mean, I'm not an expert in bipolar disorder, but the way I've understood a very kind of low level of bipolar disorder or cyclothymia is not hallucinating, not seeing things, not talking to yourself. I've understood that to be a pretty different diagnosis. And so I kind of just was like, sir, doctor, I would like to speak with a psychiatrist. So he just gave me a referral. So hopefully I can find someone who is maybe asking a bit more in-depth questions about it.
As Joanna and Alex mentioned, Bentley also found that the treatment from her therapist was extremely helpful.
Is, she's just always like, mental health is a journey and you're pretty young and people don't figure out everything about themselves ever, but also especially when they're younger, and people change and things change and nothing to be judgmental about. It's only like, you're only finding out more about you, which is a good thing.
Mental health is undoubtedly a journey, and each individual has their own unique and varied path. The similarities and shared experiences discussed by my interview participants give us a much deeper understanding for the bipolar diagnosis. But it is also important to highlight the nuance of each person's narrative. Diagnostic labels provide people with new vocabulary to contextualize and explain their experiences, but they in no way entirely encapsulate the beautiful complexity of someone's personal story. I extend the utmost gratitude to Joanna, Alex, Tatiana, and Bentley for taking the time to speak with me and for their courageous vulnerability. It is not always easy to speak upon such personal experiences, especially when they are informed by societal stigma and individual hardship. In our next and final episode of Rewriting Bipolar, we get to continue hearing the stories of our 4 lovely research participants. We will learn about how their relationship to the diagnosis has changed over time, misconceptions and stigma around bipolar disorder, and the very important ways that narrative practices and storytelling help them to make meaning out of their experiences. Thank you so much for listening to the second episode of Rewriting Bipolar. I'm your host, Sophia Olson, and remember to take care of and be kind to yourself. If you are experiencing a mental health crisis, dial 988 for help. And if you are looking for help related to depression and bipolar disorder, Visit the Depression and Bipolar Support Alliance website at dbsalliance.org for more resources.